Okay, everybody, we are going to get started. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks for our friends from Avalara for joining us as well. Without further ado, I just want to introduce Cameron Murphy, who's a strategic alliance manager at Avalara, and Daquan Banks, who's a partner sales manager at Avalara. They're going to be talking about, just automating sales tax compliance for Sage 100. And this is one that we wanted to do this time of year, as we thought it was a little bit more relevant with the recent South Dakota versus Wayfair Supreme Court ruling, which ruled that states can charge sales tax when a seller doesn't have a physical presence. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Daquan, and I'll let him introduce himself and take it from here. So Daquan, you're up.
Excellent. Thanks, Patrick. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to talk with you about how Avalara can assist with addressing any complex sales tax scenarios that you're dealing with, or maybe potentially exposed to. As Patrick mentioned, there's a lot of buzz in the industry about changes relative to remote sellers or anyone that has a remote selling model. So I'll talk a lot about the current state of affairs as it pertains to South Dakota versus Wayfair, and any other topics relative to exposure and how Avalara can assist. Just to kind of go over a brief agenda for today's discussion. Again, we'll talk about how we play in the marketplace as it pertains to sales tax compliance. We'll touch on the Wayfair case, why clients choose Avalara when it comes to future-proofing their business against changes relative to sales tax compliance. And then I'll do a brief online demonstration so that you can see how the Sage 100 integration works, so that you can familiarize yourself with how simple and easy it is to use our software should you decide to proceed with future-proofing your business from a sales tax compliance perspective. And then we'll end the call with Q&A, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions at that time. Just to kind of give you some background, so I work exclusively, my role at Avalara is I work exclusively with clients who utilize Sage ERP as their accounting platform. I've been with Avalara for about a year now. I've been in the technology industry for about 16 years. I started my career off on the network side, working in telecommunications, and then ventured over into software. And a fun fact about me, I am a gadget geek. I love technology, and to the point where I work part-time at Best Buy just for the deep discounts on new gear. So just thought I'd put that out there. Just to kind of give you a brief overview of Avalara, who we are and what we do. Avalara is a technology company that specializes in removing the complexities that comes with managing sales tax compliance for businesses. We have over 20,000 customers today. We have a sub 5% churn, so that basically means that customers who proceed with automating sales tax compliance utilizing our suite of sales tax compliance solutions are generally happy and satisfied with the effectiveness of the solution. We have over 600 pre-built integrations, and all that means for you is as your business changes, maybe you're on Sage 100 today, but you experience growth and all of a sudden you venture into enterprise management, we have an integration for the platforms that you're utilizing, both from an ERP perspective as well as a .com perspective. So it requires little to no IT involvement to integrate with our solutions because we've already done the legwork. We've done billions of transactions per year. We have managed over 25 million exemption certificates, and we've remitted over $18 billion in revenue per year and growing as a result of a lot of the activity in the marketplace with regards to automating this compliance process. So why tax compliance? Why is it something that you should look into? There's a multitude of reasons why it's important to ensure that you have a sound strategy when it comes to managing sales tax compliance, simply because complexity is growing. South Dakota versus Wayfair is one of many examples of the changing landscape relative to sales tax compliance and how you can be at risk of owing back taxes just because you haven't done your due diligence and recognizing where you may have some exposures. The other piece of this is you're not earning a dime from managing sales tax compliance, but it's your obligation to do it right. States collect the majority of their revenues as a result of sales taxes. And so it is your obligation to make sure that you're doing it right. Otherwise, you will be assessed back taxes, penalties, and interest as a result. So one of the things that many clients that I've helped when we talk about the evaluation of their sales tax scenario, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, the only thing that we need to address is tax calculations. Today, we have someone that's manually doing the research to find tax rates, and we just want an easy way to get those rates into, say, GRP. Well, tax calculations is only the tip of the iceberg. What lies under that iceberg, obviously, is where the vast majority of issues occur. So nexus being one. So again, looking at the changing landscape as a result of South Dakota versus Wayfair is a perfect example of how you can be at risk if you don't recognize where you have some exposures, whether it's economic nexus, affiliate nexus, physical nexus, obviously. Anywhere where you have a significant presence, it's your obligation to know if you have some exposure. Product taxability is another one that often gets missed simply because you have, depending on what you sell, it can have varying degrees of product taxability depending on the taxing authority where you're doing business. Jurisdictional assignments, there's over 12,000 taxing authorities in the U.S. alone, and those jurisdictional assignments are always changing. And so being up to date on what that assignment is and what the appropriate tax rates are for that jurisdiction is paramount for you to understand and to ensure that you're not, number one, overcharging your customers or misrepresenting what you owe or you need to collect for that taxing authority. Exemption certificates, that's a low-hanging fruit for auditors. Typically, when I've worked with customers during the evaluation process, instances where they've been audited comes down to not having the exact or correct or the most current exemption certificate on file for their customer to validate that tax exemption status. And as a result, it can result in back payments and penalties. Preparation, filing, and remittance of returns. This is another area that becomes complex, specifically when you get into a multi-state nexus scenario. Again, oftentimes customers that I've been able to help as a result of automating this function see this as a cumbersome, counterproductive activity, but obviously it's a requirement because it's, again, your obligation to ensure that you are filing on time 100% of the time with the correct liability. And then last but certainly not least, just being audit ready. Customers who use a manual process typically aren't audit ready. And again, this is low-hanging fruit for an auditor. And so when clients are looking at evaluating solutions providers or third party or outsourcing this function, it really comes down to being able to answer the question if you feel like based on what you have available to you, you are audit ready. So now we'll talk about South Dakota versus Wayfair. So in 1992, there was the Quilcor versus North Dakota case where physical or significant presence was being evaluated. And at that time, brick and mortar was the way customers transacted with businesses. And so with the Quilcor versus North Dakota case, Quilcor had a catalog portion of their business, which resulted in the state of North Dakota saying, well, we have a remote selling scenario. There's enough activity in our state from Quilcor. We should be receiving, the Quilcor should be collecting sales taxes and remitting that to the state. Well, at that time, there wasn't enough examples of this happening. And of course, the courts at that time ruled in favor of Quilcor. Fast forward to today, remote selling is a common activity from an economics perspective. And as a result, there's a lot of activity across all of the states that warrants reevaluation of redefining the rules of significant presence. And that's the key, because oftentimes a lot of folks that I've talked to, that they assume that if they're not utilizing an online platform, then they don't necessarily have to respond to the South Dakota versus Wayfair ruling. That's far from the truth. Essentially, the South Dakota versus Wayfair ruling is an assessment on remote selling and defining economic thresholds to say there's enough activity in our market to validate that you have significant presence in our state. And as a result, you're required to register, collect, file, and remit as a result of that activity. And so the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the states on June 21st. And I will tell you, we've been pretty busy over at Avalara as a result of this ruling, simply because all of the states, I mean, we get updates pretty much weekly on states that are now adopting their own version of economic nexus. And so just to kind of talk about economic nexus and what we're seeing on our side as it pertains to thresholds. So again, it's all about significant presence and defining what that looks like. In the past, it was brick and mortar, so physical presence. Today, the way we do business is online, remote selling scenarios, just because of technology and the advancements in technology that it allows us to do so. And as a result, the states are adopting specific thresholds to determine significant presence from an economic nexus perspective. And so an example would be states are looking at having a revenue threshold, and that revenue threshold could be $100,000 in revenue per year for that taxing authority. Or it could be 200 transactions. Maybe you don't hit the revenue threshold, but you hit the transactional threshold. It's defining significant presence, and that's what a lot of the states are adopting to ensure that they are able to leverage this revenue opportunity for their respective locations. And so why Avalara? So we kind of talked about what's happening in the marketplace relative to South Dakota versus Wayfair, but in general, almost 50% of state revenues come from the collection of sales taxes. And obviously, if I'm in a position of authority for a specific taxing authority, I don't want to impose additional income taxes on my constituents. I'd rather look at other avenues to generate that revenue. And as you can see, sales taxes is an easy way for the states to generate additional revenue for the respective locations. As a result of just sort of the evaluation of e-commerce sales, there's estimated that $13 billion in revenue has gone uncollected as a result of not having economic nexus thresholds across all of the states. And so the net of this bullet point is to say, this is a huge revenue opportunity for states, and they are absolutely highly motivated to adopt their own version of economic nexus. As I mentioned, we get updates weekly. We actually have a website that I'll provide to Patrick to pass along to you guys. So you can see, we maintain the website, so you can stay up to date on the changes that's occurring relative to states that are adopting their own thresholds for economic nexus. And so this slide is just another area where if you don't have the resources or the expertise readily available, which most companies won't, right, and especially in the small and medium-sized business space, you're not going to have resources that have the expertise and understanding not only the different taxing authorities across the U.S., but the multitude of product taxability rules. So an example would be in New York, bagels, depending on how it's consumed, is taxed differently. If it's sliced, it's considered taxable. If it's not sliced, it's considered exempt. And so having the resources available to not only discern the taxing authorities, there's over 12,000 taxing authorities, the respective rates for each taxing authority, and then also product taxability rules. Once you get into that multi-state nexus scenario, as I mentioned earlier, it becomes quite cumbersome and hard to keep up. Okay. And I touched on the jurisdictional assignments, but this kind of gives you some perspective on the gravity of having to dedicate resources to keeping up with all of the rules, all of the changes in the marketplace relative to being compliant. A lot of times companies say, well, why should we outsource this? Why should we remove, we have a couple of dedicated resources doing this today. We haven't been audited. Why should we even look at outsourcing this function? Well, the same thing could be, said about payroll. When payroll, before payroll became an automated function, it's a non-revenue generating activity, but it's obviously your obligation to pay your resources for the work that they're doing. And many companies adopted automating the payroll function, and as a result, it's common. It's something that is a no-brainer because, again, it's a non-revenue generating activity. Same thing applies for sales tax compliance. You're not earning a dime as a result of dedicating resources to managing this function. However, it is your obligation to not only do it, but do it correctly. Additionally, just looking at some studies, we had a third-party firm, Aberdeen Research Group, and Wakefield Research, take a look at, sort of the cost of compliance and sort of the risk that companies are exposed to when they decide to perform this function in-house. And as you can see from the graphic on the screen, in most cases, 75% of the time, auditors are likely to find mistakes when this function is being performed manually. And again, if you're in a single state, flat rate state scenario, you're not going to have that big of an issue because there's not a lot of complexities associated with that function. But once you start to get into a multi-state nexus scenario, again, this becomes quite cumbersome and hard to keep up with. And so how does Avalara address the sales tax compliance challenge? So first, we have software that automates the entire sales tax compliance process, soup to nuts. But specifically, a lot of customers that I've spoken with recently have questions and concerns as a response to South Dakota versus Wayfair. So typical questions that I'm asked is, well, today I'm in 5 states, but I sell all over the U.S. I don't even know where to start. Well, we offer ancillary services to help with performing a nexus study so that we can help you make the business decision to say, okay, here's why we need to register versus, registering in states where you really don't have a need to register in. And so we perform ancillary services in addition to automating the compliance process moving forward for you. And so we want to take the guesswork. We're a one-stop shop when it comes to sales tax compliance. We help take the guesswork out of defining your business strategy relative to becoming compliant. And so Nexus is absolutely important to understand what your exposure is. I actually had a client in the waste removal industry. He assumed that, waste removal was non-taxable everywhere, so he didn't register in any other states outside of the state where he had physical presence. And he received a love note from the state of New York stating that he actually had exposure, and that came in the form of a $200,000 audit. And so again, we help take the guesswork out of that for you. We want to make sure you understand exactly where you have some exposures, and we want to help you right-size your business as a result. Product taxability is a big one. Again, using that same example, waste removal is taxable in New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey, but it's not taxable in South Carolina, North Carolina, and some other states. But not having the resources or expertise in understanding that can certainly put you in a position where you're at risk and you can potentially be, outside of compliance and resulting in significant fines and penalties. Jurisdictional assignments, again, we have the resources. We have over 100 resources dedicated to content alone. These resources are available to ensure that we have all the product taxability rules up to date, jurisdictional assignments up to date. We don't use zip codes. Most clients use zip codes when they utilize the manual process for looking up tax rates. We ensure that we're getting accurate information all the way down to the lowest jurisdictional level, and zip codes is not the appropriate way to accomplish that. And so we have these resources dedicated to ensuring that our content is always up to date 100% of the time. Exemption certificate management, again, we have a streamlined solution that automates this function for your business. So rather than the manual process that most clients utilize today, when they utilize Avalara's suite of solutions, they realize a significant advantage as it pertains to being audit ready. As I mentioned earlier, exemption certificates are low-hanging fruit for an auditor to say, hey, you are outside of compliance, and as a result, here's what you owe us for not being compliant. And so we streamline that entire process tonight. So we'll walk through some examples shortly. Preparing, filing, and remitting returns. Again, single state scenario, not a big deal. Once you get into a multi-state nexus scenario, that's when it becomes cumbersome. We're able to automate this process, and I'll walk you through exactly what that looks like for your business. And then last but certainly not least, because we're doing all of this for you behind the scenes, automating the entire process, everything is leveraging technology. We've been in business for 14 years, so we've built the infrastructure to support your level of growth. We can absolutely accommodate growth and any changes to your business or changes in the landscape as it pertains to law. We will always ensure that you're audit ready so that you have access to information real time to validate that you are compliant. So one of the I mentioned that earlier or during the presentation is a key differentiator for us is that we have spent the time and money and resources developing a wide-ranging ecosystem that enables us to grow as you grow. So what's captured here in this graphic is less about the names that you see, but more so about our ability to accommodate any changes to your business. So if today you're on Sage 100, but you decide to move to enterprise management, again, as I mentioned, we've already built a connector into your platform so that we can reduce the time spent in developing or integrating into your platform so we can help you get live as quickly as possible. There's no on-prem work that has to be done. We've already done the legwork. All you would have to do is download the software, configure it to your ERP, and then set up your sales tax profile and off you go. And so what's represented here is that we can accommodate any changes to your business. If today you're only using Sage 100 for transactions, but tomorrow you decide to develop an online platform, chances are we already have a pre-built connector into that shopping cart that you decide to utilize. If you do not use a shopping cart that we have a pre-built connector to, or you're using an ERP platform that we don't have a connector to, we also offer API packages that allows you to configure your homegrown platform to talk to our system. We've done 80% of the work. You just have to do 20% of the work, and that 20% really is just getting your platform to talk to ours. And we offer all sorts of information and flow sheets to help you get set up. Now we'll talk about how it all comes together. So we have three core solutions. The first solution that I'll talk about is sort of at the center of it all, and it's our AvaTax solution. And so AvaTax is our tax calculation solution. So this is the solution that's going to hook into your instance of Sage and automate the tax calculation process. And so what you see demonstrated here in this graphic is once you've configured your instance of Sage to talk to our AvaTax engine, the two systems will be communicating back and forth. So Sage would call to our AvaTax engine. AvaTax would reference the cloud that you see there. The cloud represents where our content resides. And then that cloud is going to return a response based on the full ship to address. Again, we don't use zip codes, as well as any product taxability rules that we need to layer in. You'll tell us what you sell. So if you have some products that may have some unique taxability, we have the content for it. So all of this is happening real time, and our solution returns a response in a sub-second. And so your process doesn't change. Once you complete that invoice, you will now have in a sub-second, and I'll show you that today, a response with the tax rate calculated on that invoice. And each time that Sage calls to our AvaTax engine, we're recording that transaction. And what that allows us to do is provide you with reporting down to the lowest jurisdictional level, as well as it allows us to prepare a filing remit on your behalf. And I'll talk about that shortly. We do offer an exemption certificate management solution called CertCapture. So CertCapture allows us to streamline the exemption certificate management process soup to nuts. There's three core features that a lot of clients like, and I'll show you that during today's demo. But high level, the first is the onboarding process for new clients. And many Sage customers that I've helped, they have a base of tax-exempt clients because they're typically in the manufacturing industry. And so this becomes a value add for them. And what it allows them to do is simplify the onboarding process for a new customer. So today, a customer may go to the DOR website for their respective taxing authority, download and print off the exemption certificate, sign it, scan it back, send it to you, and then you warehouse it, whether it's a physical filing cabinet or maybe it's an online repository that you use for document management. In either case, it's an inconvenience. And oh, by the way, in most cases, you may have some challenges getting that information from your customer because it's complex. With CertCapture, the onboarding process is simple. All you would do is go to your CertCapture dashboard. You would hit send request. The customer will receive a web link. They click the web link, fill out the web form. hit submit, and now you have the actual exemption certificate completed in your repository, and now you have instant access to it. The second feature is the reporting feature that notifies you. You can set up notifications, maybe it's every Monday, to let you know for your existing base of exemption certificate customers if you have any exemption certificates that's set to expire. Okay? This becomes a value add as you get into, again, a multi-state nexus scenario, because you do have some states that have annual expiring exemption certificates. So Florida is a perfect example of a state that has that. And so having to keep up with that can become quite cumbersome. Whereas with the Cert Capture solution, you can create reports that notifies you that you have these 10 customers that's set to expire in the next 60 days. And then you can proactively reach out to those customers and then utilize the exact same process that you would use for a new customer coming on board. And then the last feature, this goes into sort of the theme of being audit, is in the event of an audit, as I mentioned, exemption certificates are low-hanging fruit for an auditor. Auditor says, hey, I need you to validate customer ID ABC. You would copy that customer ID, pop it into your search box, hit the search button, and then now you're able to retrieve that information from your customers. Okay, so that's the Cert Capture. Those are three core features that the Cert Capture solution offers. Again, the solution is far more robust than that, and certainly depending on your needs, you will find that it allows you to really streamline your exemption certificate management process from utilizing a manual process today. And then last but certainly not least is the return solution that we offer. So as I mentioned, every time that Sage calls to our AvaTax engine, we're recording that transaction. And what that allows us to do is to prepare, file, and remit on your behalf, automating that entire process for you. And so essentially what will happen is, because we are tracking the transactional data down to the lowest jurisdictional level, we're able to prepare the actual sales tax form on your behalf. We act as treasury, so we'll transfer via ACH the lump sum liability for that filing period, and then we'll disseminate it across all of the taxing authorities where you've told us to file and remit on your behalf. That solution also includes notice management, so if you receive any notices from any of the taxing authorities that we're remitting on your behalf in, you just send it to our compliance team. We'll take it from there. Okay. And so what I'm going to do now is just pause and switch over to just kind of showing you the integration in Sage so you can visualize exactly what it looks like. And then we'll go into Q&A. Okay. And so this is Sage 100 ERP. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a sales order. And what I want you to see is essentially how quickly the solution returns a response when performing a tax calculation. And what you'll notice is the process is no different than what you do today. The biggest difference is you no longer have to worry about doing the research and updating tax rate tables. Anything manual relative to getting content goes away. It all resides behind our AvaTax tax schedule, and I'll show you that in a minute. So the first thing I want to call to your attention is this AvaTax tax schedule. Once you've configured your instance of Sage 100 to talk to our AvaTax solution, you'll notice that you'll have an AvaTax tax schedule populated in that field. So what this means for you is you no longer have to go in and search for a multitude of tax rate tables. This AvaTax tax schedule is where all of the content for all of the 12,000 plus taxing authorities, all of the 1,800 product taxability rules, all of that content resides behind this AvaTax tax schedule. So as long as you see that tax schedule there, you don't have to worry about content because, again, we're going to be making those tax determinations behind the scenes via the cloud database that we have available. Okay. And so now I'm just going to select the item code just to perform a tax calculation. Let's see. Let's do. Okay. And so I'm going to go to the totals tab, and you'll see AvaTax is Right now, it's just doing a configuration validation. And just bear with me, this is a demo environment, so the actual tax calculation is a lot faster than that. But you'll see it's already made the tax determination represented here in this line item. But that's pretty much it. The solution will call to our AvaTax engine. AvaTax will return a response based on the full ship to address, and it will apply the tax rate for that line item on the invoice, and then you're done. And that's essentially it. It's as simple as that. Next, I'm going to show you the dashboard that you'll have access to as a customer. So this dashboard basically gives you access to reports. You can look at your transactions. If you need to get additional information down to the lowest jurisdictional level because the customer has a question, you can get all that information from your Avalara dashboard. And so what you see here is an example of transactions that's been captured on the dashboard. And so this allows you to, again, do, if you want to go granular and look at a transaction, you can certainly do so. In this case, let's see, this particular transaction was just utilizing the TPP tax code. And so you'll see that it provided some additional information down to the lowest jurisdictional level for the ship to address. And so if you ever have a scenario where a customer is asking, well, why did you tax me so much? You'll have that detail readily available to you, okay? The other feature here, what I would like to show you is our return solution. And so with returns, what you're able to do is take a look at your total liability based on what we've tracked from the call from Sage to our AvaTax engine, and then we're able to make those, we're able to file a remit on your behalf. We always recommend that you go in when you first become a subscriber and compare your GL to what we have tracked. But as long as it goes to that call path that I've described, we are 100% confident that we've tracked that information accurately. Okay. So what you see at the top is a sum view of your total liability. And that sum view is essentially what I referenced earlier, that this is the amount that will transfer via ACH from your account, which is representative of the lump sum liability for that filing period. So again, and of course, this is a demo environment, so we have a lot of transactions and activities. But what I want to show you is we break it all the way down across all of the taxing authorities that you've asked us to file a remit on your behalf in. And so if you wanted to get down to any specific details, you certainly can based on the taxing authority. And what you see represented here is in this instance, the client has approved proceeding with us filing on behalf of them in these states. So we'll go ahead and file a remit on your behalf. If you don't go into the system to verify or compare your GL to what we have tracked, that's fine. We're going to make sure that we file and remit on your behalf 100% of the time, on time, so that you don't have to worry about it. We typically ask that you go into the system between the 1st and 10th of each month. And as long as you do that, you have time to make any changes if necessary. If not, we lock the system down after the 12th of the month so that we can file a remit typically by the 20th of each month. That's sort of our target. Again, with the goal in mind is ensuring that we get it done on time 100% of the time. So again, this becomes a function that you no longer have to worry about. Okay. And then I'll show you the cert capture solution. So with cert capture, you'll have a cert capture dashboard. This is the exemption certificate management solution that I referenced. And so I'll show you a couple cool features here that you'll have access to as a cert capture subscriber. The first is the onboarding of a customer. And so what we're able to do essentially is help you simplify the search process for a customer, onboarding a new customer, creating custom reports so that you're notified of any expiring exemption certificates, et cetera. But I'll show you exactly what it looks like, what the customer will receive, and then sort of that process. Bear with me. Okay. And so this is an example of an email that your customer will receive. Once you send the request to your customer is going to click on a link that's going to be in the body of that email. Okay. Customer hits accept, and then now they are able to create the requested document for that taxing authority. So in this case, the customer is missing an exemption certificate for North Carolina and Washington. They can essentially create that request, fill out the information, sign it, so you can identify the tax exemption reason. So in this case, we'll pick resale. All right, next. Customer will fill out this information. I'm not going to do it right now, but essentially as they're filling out this information, it's populating the actual exemption certificate for that taxing authority. Customer can sign using your mouse, hit submit, and then now you have that information in your database readily available to you to retrieve at any given point. And what I would like to show now is the website. And Patrick, I'll send this to you after the call. But if you have any additional questions or you want to keep up with any particular states that you may be that you may have some exposure to as a result of South Dakota versus Wayfair, we do have a web page that we keep up to date all the time. So that you can stay in the know as it pertains to your business and activity in states that you may have some exposure in. So what you want to do is, and you can go to any one of these links, but what I want to show you is this Get Educated link. Certainly recommend you go to this link once you get the website, and then just kind of go through the process of just making sure you know exactly which states have enacted its own form of economic nexus thresholds, with effective dates already in place, those with effective dates coming up, so that you can look at your business activity and say, you know, we probably need to do our due diligence and making sure that we've done the analysis, we understand what our exposures are, we understand what our liability could potentially be, and you're making the decision to become compliant, because again, states are chomping at the bit for opportunities to increase revenue coming into their respective taxing authorities, and this is a way for them to achieve that. And so I'm going to stop there, Patrick, and see if there's any questions.
No, well, I think Cameron has the questions, but I will include the link to this for the listeners. I'll include the link for this in the automated email that you're going to receive from GoToWebinar that also has the recording for this. So just look out for that link in there. Cameron, if you want to go ahead and address questions.
Yeah, Naquan, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. First off, thank you so much for that. For me, it's something I see all the time, and it's still a great refresher. There's a lot of moving parts, so it's great to stay on top of it, and we're glad that you run a point on that. Very knowledgeable, and that was very educating. We've had a number of questions come through. I've been able to reach out direct and answer most of them. We do have some questions that can probably apply to the group as a whole, so wanted to go ahead and maybe just throw a couple your way and see what you think. We had one come through that said, if I'm not sure where we should be collecting sales tax, or we have questions about anything we saw today, where should I begin?
Sure. And so what I always offer, that's a great question. What I always offer customers is a couple paths. So number one, if you have a CPA firm that you do business with today, certainly reach out to them and ask for them to do a couple things, either a nexus study and a product taxability study. And so the reason why that's important is because if you may have a trigger, a nexus, a triggering event or activity, whether it's traveling sales folks or economic nexus potentially, or affiliate nexus, That nexus study is going to help you understand exactly where you have exposure from that perspective. The product taxability analysis or study is going to help you understand, okay, you may have a nexus triggering activity, but you don't have product taxability, right? So does it make business sense for you to proceed with registering in a state where you have no liability, right? And so those are business decisions that you have to make, but educating yourself on what your exposure looks like is paramount. And you can do that through a CPA firm. You can also go through Avalara because, again, we are a one-stop shop when it comes to sales tax compliance. This is what we do. We have the resources and infrastructure to support you from automating the compliance process to addressing and assisting you with ancillary services like performing a nexus study or doing a product taxability analysis or helping you get registered. We have ancillary services. We have departments that their full-time job is dedicated solely on those ancillary services. So I would say if you're not sure, that is where I would recommend you start.
Excellent. So one more here before we adjourn, which I think is a good one, and I know we come across it all the time. How does pricing work for the sales tax solution? Is it user-based? Is it transactional? If we start small, is it scalable? Sure. What is that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's another really good question, and that's always the last question that's asked during my demos. So our product is consumption based. So when we look at the core solutions, so the AvaTax solution, the exemption certificate management solution, and the return solution is all based on consumption. So I'll start with AvaTax. So AvaTax, so all of our solutions, it's an annual subscription. So let me just put that out there. So you pay for it, you have it for a year, and then after that point, you can make the decision to renew. And as I mentioned, most customers do proceed with us. Our churn is very low because they're satisfied with the automated solution. So with AvaTax, we look at the total number of completed invoices per year in your nexus states, right? So you may be selling outside of your nexus states, but we only look at where you're registered so that you can collect sales taxes and remit, because obviously if you're collecting in states outside of your nexus footprint where you're not registered, that's illegal. And so we only look at where you have completed transactions, both taxable and non-taxable in your nexus states. And as a result of that, we'll put you in a pricing tier. And based on your activity, so if you're doing 10,000 versus 20,000, you'll be placed in the pricing tier, and there's an associated cost for that pricing tier. And so what we do when we talk about pricing with clients is we want to make sure we go through an evaluation process so we can help answer those questions and give you specifics as it pertains to what it would cost. Same thing holds true for our exemption certificate management solution. We look at total number of exemption certificate documents per year that you are set to manage. So you can use, previous year activity or any projections that you may have. We look at the total number of documents and again, put you in a pricing tier. Then for our return solution, what we do is we look at you provide us with your filing calendar if you have it. If you're set to register in more states and you don't know what your total number of documents are, we have two options. You can either prepay, which means you know the total number, or you have a pretty good idea of the total number of returns you'll use per year. And you can prepay and realize some cost savings on a per return basis. Or you can just opt to pay as you go because maybe you just don't know the total number of returns that you have to file per year. Or you'd rather not pay up front. You just want to pay as you go as you use it. It's a slightly higher cost, but again, it's on a per return basis, and there's a cost associated with it. And that per return rate can be anywhere between $48 and $54 per return.
Excellent. I think that's some good questions for in regards to timing. As much as we've done and covered today, we do have some others. Those that we didn't get to, we will reach out to you direct offline. And Naquan, that's what I had for today. I appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. It's been my pleasure.
Yep, and I want to thank you guys as well from everyone here at BCS ProSoft. So for everyone else, thanks again for joining us. We'll give you back another 10 minutes of your day. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, you can always talk to your account manager at BCS ProSoft, or you can just reply to the automatic email, and that'll come to me and our team, and we'll get your your questions answered by Cameron and Aquan as needed. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So again, thank you guys so much, and we look forward to talking to you next time.